Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I want to talk about my top 5 favorite Forgotten Realms books. So, the Forgotten Realms was the first campaign setting that I really got into back when I first started getting into Dungeons & Dragons. It wasn't the first setting I ever owned. That distinction belongs to the Dragonlance setting. But I never ended up expanding the Dragonlance collection beyond that initial 3rd edition campaign setting and like some 2nd edition modules and stuff that I was able to get for cheap because somebody sold their collection off at my local game store. But I absolutely love the Forgotten Realms, and I've run tons of campaigns in there. And I wanted to go over my top 5 favorite books as of late June 2025. I'm sure this list can change all the time, and I consider doing a top 10, but we're in the middle of a heat wave right now, and even though it's nicer in the basement, it's still kind of on the warm side versus my nice and cool air-conditioned living room. So a top 5 is all we're going to do for today. So with that in mind, this is just my personal list, and everybody's is going to be different, so you can always feel free to let me know what your favorite Forgotten Realms books and supplements. I'm talking about the role-playing books, not the novels. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. So coming in at number 5, we have Faiths and Pantheons. This book is just fantastic, and it set some pretty high expectations for the Deities and Demigods book for the standard 3rd edition game, which unfortunately were kind of dashed on the rocks because that book was not very good. But this book was absolutely awesome. And you have the amazing cover art here. You've got Bane, and I'm thinking that's Helm, I'm thinking that's Helm. Facing off against him. I can't quite make out the holy symbol there, but just such a cool looking artwork here. But what was great about this book is that if we take a look on the inside here, our greater deities, the major deities, actually got a pretty significant write-up for them. We do have like the divine traits and stuff like that, but if we take a look, so we have Azuth here, and we actually get, over 2 pages of information on him, including a stat block, which not the biggest fan of, I'm going to be completely totally honest, but we got all of this stuff here, all of this background information here, sort of how their churches are ordered, right? The most powerful member of a given temple is known as the first, and is referred to as the revered one, right? So it gives you some pretty cool information, right? History and relationships, clergy and temple, and then you've got the stat block itself, along with the possessions of different powers that they have. So it's not a ton of information, but it was just so cool to see. My favorite one, though, would have to be Bane, because look at this right-up here again. Just tons of great information here, and you've got the image of Bane emerging from, his son, which took over his domain after Bane was killed during the Time of Troubles, although like Baal, Bane planted divine seeds across the realms, and one of them, actually was successful in becoming a deity, and he ended up overtaking him. It's been a while since I looked through it, so, I might be a little bit mistaken, but he did emerge from his own son, so he did actually basically reconstitute himself by destroying his offspring, which was, again, kind of what Baal was trying to do in the Baldur's Gate computer games, only less successfully, though Baal would return eventually, which actually was in a product that could have made this list as well, had I been thinking about adventures and modules a little bit more. But again, just really cool stuff. We have like information on their avatars. This is just a really, really cool book, so we get some great information for the major deities there. And then we go into sort of the lesser deities. There's Tempest, Timora, Umberlee. Right, and then we got the other deities. So they get less information, but it honestly feels like they still get more information than like the Deities and Demigods book. We do have Oriel, the Frost Maiden, and I am currently running Rime of the Frost Maiden using the new 5e rules for a couple of friends. And they're on the verge. They're going to be facing off. I modified the adventure a little bit. But they're going to be facing off against essentially like an aspect of Auril there. But really cool to see her here in this earlier artwork. Really, really cool stuff. So she's a lesser deity. But what we also have here is we actually have like racial pantheons, right? So we got like the Drow pantheon and a bunch of the other like Drow deities that exist or existed at the time that this came out. We've got the Dwarven pantheon. We've got the Elven pantheon here. Again, quite a few Dwarven deities. We got the Elven pantheon. And then one pantheon that I actually dedicated quite a bit of a campaign to. Once we get to it here, there's the Gnomish pantheon, believe it or not. The Halfling pantheon. The Mulhorandi pantheon, which is essentially the Egyptian gods. Worshipped in Mulhorand and Unther, I think. But yeah, we got the Orc pantheon here. So, years ago, I ran a D&D campaign which was inspired by the City of the Spider Queen and like the War of the Spider Queen novel series, where basically Lolth fell silent and like other Drow deities were kind of struggling for like to take over as like the supreme god of the Drow. And so what I actually ended up having was a plot by Ilneval, or Ilneval, I always pronounce it Ilneval, but it was a plot by him to assassinate Groomish and become like the major Orc deity. It involved the discovery of a race of orcs that had been hidden away for millennia, which were inspired more by like the Uruk-hai type of thing. They called them war orcs. Anyway, it was a fun campaign. It's the one that lasted for quite a while. It did shrink down from like at one point I had 10 players in the campaign, but it did shrink down to just a single player. But it was still a lot of fun to go through, and I really enjoyed it. And but it was based off of like using this Orc pantheon, and I just absolutely adore this book. So this is one of my favorite Forgotten Realms books, but we're putting it at number 5 on the list for today. Coming in at number 4, we've got the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms campaign setting. This is, truthfully, to this day, still one of the best campaign setting books that's ever been released. Like, there is some amazing level of detail in here, and I'm not just talking about like the different feats and player options or prestige classes or stuff like that, but when we get more into the like gazetteer stuff, like here we've got life in Faerun, the rural life, city life, families, marriages, adventures, but we've even got stuff like this, like trade route information, like what resources are traded, who they're traded to, like how the exchanges go down. So Mulhorand sends gold, which gets transferred from this location back into Lorien, and it's a really thorough campaign setting, and this was just a ton of fun to go through and sort of check out and spend some time trying to come up with adventure ideas for. Lots of great NPCs are included in here. You think you have Dritz in here as well. His stat block is included, and some of the other champions of the hall have their stat blocks included in subsequent releases, like some of the other supplement books that ended up coming out. But yeah, just a great level of detail here. Do we have... Yeah, there we go. We got Fizal Shembril, who was the leader of the Zentarum. I think canonically in Forgotten Realms now, it's back to Manchun. But I mean, this guy with his, Fu Manchu or handlebar, like extreme mustache there. A little hard to take kind of seriously, I'm not going to lie. I wish the artwork didn't include like the flowing handlebar mustache. But yeah, really, really cool stuff. This was an absolutely fantastic... There's Dritz. This was an absolutely fantastic campaign setting. The only issue that I had with it is it was very, very tied to the novels that had come out. And not so much the campaign setting itself, although it does reference events from several different Forgotten Realms novels in its timeline and chronologies and some of its regional things. But it's more my experiences running this version of the Forgotten Realms, especially early on. Like, I love this book, and it's not really this book's fault, but I ran some third edition Forgotten Realms adventures that involved elements from the different like major events, like the Time of Troubles and stuff like that, that was covered in different novels. Only my explanations or my outcomes were different, and there was a player who had read a ton of the Forgotten Realms novels, and if you changed anything or got anything wrong from the official, like, published literature, it was almost insufferable to deal with, right? So I kind of, unfortunately, have a little trouble distinguishing or divorcing that experience from the book. But yeah, overall, this is one of the greatest campaign setting books ever written. Hands down. It's just one of those things that you had decades of novels and continuity that you were trying to keep up with, and that's admirable, but, like, I'm not as big a fan of being restricted that way. I kind of prefer campaign settings where they give you some details to go off of, but kind of make you feel more comfortable going off and doing your own thing. And I'm not saying that this book didn't do that, but I just didn't feel like I could do that, more or less just based on the experiences that I had. So I freely admit this is a situation kind of like my early memories of second edition AD&D, where it was more the experience of dealing with some of the other people that I played with at the time versus the book itself. But yeah, this is still a fantastic book. I want to say it's available on print on demand on DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG. I'm not 100% on that, but if it is and you're interested, you should definitely check it out. Just take a quick hydration break here, because like I said, we are in the middle of a heat wave. That's good. All right, up next at number, what's that? 5, 4. Number 3, we have the Neverwinter campaign setting. So this was for 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and it did release to coincide with the Neverwinter MMO. But I always really liked this book for one major reason. When you think of like the Sword Coast region of the Forgotten Realms, and you think of some of the more like iconic cities, a lot of times it's Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate that gets a ton of the attention. Right, for example, there was a Waterdeep book that released for 3rd edition D&D, Waterdeep City of Splendors. There wasn't a Baldur's Gate one, interestingly enough, but I just always liked the idea of the Neverwinter, the city of Neverwinter there being sort of this northern region, but there's like volcanic hot springs and stuff that keep the area relatively like comfortably warm, so that sort of like this refuge from like the unforgiving wilderness kind of surrounding the region. Also, I loved the Neverwinter Dritz books, and I know I just crapped on the idea of people being really beholden to the novels and stuff like that, but I didn't really port the Dritz novels into my games or anything like that. I just really enjoyed the novels, and I sort of developed a newfound appreciation for the city of Neverwinter itself. I also played the MMO a little bit too. But yeah, this is just a really cool book to a city that, is sort of, it's mentioned quite a bit, but it doesn't seem to get as much love and attention as like as Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep there. So you got the regional map here. You got Neverwinter. You have Luskan up there. The Sword Mountains down to Waterdeep there. So yeah, it's north of Waterdeep. And again, this was just a really fun book to sort of look through and read through. You got the character options, stuff like that. But what was also really cool about this one, you got your racial variants. Again, a ton of like player character stuff there. But yeah, so some Neverwinter campaign ideas and adventure suggestions, some NPCs to sort of think about, the abolithic sovereignty, so like if you wanted to have almost like a Lovecraftian thing, you could do that as well. Just, again, a really fun book to sort of look through. So you have the two major factions, the Ashmedai, I think it's called. Yeah, the Ashmedai, who are Asmodeus worshippers, and they were vying for control of the region. And they were sort of coming up against, there's Valindra's Shadow Mantle as well, by the way, but they were also coming up against the Red Wizards, who were the other faction, which I guess Valindra, I think, was part of the Thanes, is she not? Yeah. So Valindra is part of the Thane contingent there. Just, again, a really fun book to sort of look through. But what was also really cool about it, we do have our Gazetteer section, but we also have, if I can find it here, Neverwinter Wood. There was also a little section, the Dread Ring, that was created by the Netherese. But there is a section on the Shadowfell equivalent. Here we go. So we got like Evernight, and again, this was something that I really, really enjoyed. The Shadowfell for 4th edition was such a better inclusion, in my opinion, than the traditional Plane of Shadow. The traditional Plane of Shadow was just basically like a negative image of everything, like inverted colors and stuff like that. But the Shadowfell is a twisted reflection of the material world. So cities can be in similar locations and occupy certain similar spaces within, the different planes, but they are very, very different. So you've got, instead of it being like a river that runs through the city, you've got this lava flow. It's filled with undead. You actually, at the beginning of the Vecna campaign for 5th edition D&D, you actually find your way into Evernight. So again, I loved, you got the Temple of Filth, which again, I'm going to say that I'm 100% biased because, anything of Filth is awesome, because like my favorite band is Cradle of Filth. So I always kind of associate that. It's why, in my campaigns, getting Filth Fever is like the coolest disease of all. But anyway, just a really awesome book, and just kind of fun to see the spotlight shown on a city that kind of gets a little bit overlooked compared to cities like Baldur's Gate and Waterdeep there. So again, just really, really cool to see. It does also have the double-sided map. One side is Neverwinter, the other side is Evernight. So really awesome stuff there. So the Neverwinter campaign setting book for 4th edition D&D is number 3 on my list. Coming in at number 2, we've got Lords of Darkness. So this was one of the 3.0 books that came out. In 3.0, a lot of their supplement books were softcover, although unlike the base role-playing game softcover books, this one was still at least in full color. But this book is awesome for one reason and one reason alone. This is a showcase book for all of the evil factions that operate in the world of Toril. You've got the Zentarum, you've got the Red Wizards, you've got what other organizations do we have here that they focus on? So we've got the Arcane Brotherhood, we have the Church of Bane, the Church of Shar, the Demon Fae. You've got the Mulgrims, Mind Flayers. So you get all kinds of really cool information. The Church of Cyric, the Drow, the Cult of Dragons. So again, this book was absolutely awesome, and it did come with some really great tools for creating like stuff on the fly if you needed to, or if you just didn't want to spend a great deal of time making NPCs for the role-playing game, because in 3rd edition, to make a humanoid NPC was the same steps as making a player character, only they tended to have lesser access to things. But yeah, we got, like I said, the Cult of the Dragon, who played a major role in the earliest 5th edition campaigns. Just a really awesome book. We got the Drow. We have the Night Masks, which worship, I believe, Shar. Or they're a Thieves Guild. So just really, really awesome stuff here. I love this book. I used this quite a bit when I was running some of my... Actually, I used this book quite a bit when I was running a campaign where the players were actually members of the Zentarum, only I didn't get to run very much of the campaign because, like any time that we ever tried to have a campaign involving the players being evil characters, they always just sort of degraded and fell apart into just, like, being murderous, like, maniacs, which was not fun. It ruined the whole like theme of the game that I was running, and I was really trying to make an evil campaign that worked, like especially with the Zentarum, because the Zentarum, especially in third edition, like they weren't about military conquest so much as they were political and economical manipulations. So, for example, they were trying to establish themselves as like a trusted trade partner. So they unleashed this disease in a decently sized like town or settlement that was still isolated enough that it would be a bit of a task to get supplies to, while hiring mercenaries to basically, like, through, not directly, but hiring mercenaries through, like, these third parties, or sort of through these different layers of sort of diffusing who they were actually working for, to hijack the caravans and steal any of the supplies that were going, until a famous hero of the North would vow to escort the supplies personally, only to have the player characters go in and then prevent them from succeeding. But at the same time, really hammering home the fact that this hero was not allowed to be killed. Because if the hero died trying to get these supplies, then he died a hero. But if he fails, then he simply failed, and he has to carry that burden with him. And then the Zentarum would eventually turn around and be the ones to successfully deliver these supplies that have been like recreated or rebranded with their own logos on it. And I was trying to be a bit more, like I said, instead of it being like, oh, you're evil, so you just go around slaughtering people, I wanted it to be a bit more underhanded, right? I wanted it to be sort of like the subtle version of evil. Unfortunately, the campaign just fell apart because the players did what the players will do anyway. It wasn't the healthiest gaming group, and I'm glad that I kind of moved on and found a much better, a much more consistent and stable group to play with. But this book was still absolutely fantastic, and I got this pretty close to a time where if I would have waited any longer, I probably wouldn't have been able to get it, because I bought this when 3.5 came out, and a lot of these books had gone out of print. So I think I got one of the last copies that my game store's distributor actually had, because a few weeks later, another person that I knew was trying to get those softcover books, and he couldn't get any of them because they were gone. This was like a week or two later. So I'm glad that I got it when I did. But yeah, just a book dedicated to all these evil organizations. Just a great, great resource for your campaign. So it's my second favorite Forgotten Realms book of all time. All right, coming in at number 1. This is going to be controversial, I know, and some people are not going to be happy with this, but hey, it's my list, it's my preferences, and I'll explain why here in a moment. But my favorite Forgotten Realms book would have to be the 4th edition Forgotten Realms campaign setting. And the biggest reason for this is because they decided to kind of distance themselves from the official novels. Unfortunately, around this time, they were also kind of slowing down or almost outright stopping with producing novels. I think other than like R.A. Salvatore, there was some stuff that was coming out, like there were some Ed Greenwood books and stuff, but they were kind of slowing down a lot of the novels. And after the Sundering storyline, which was the 4th to 5th edition sort of like setup, I feel like the novels dropped off almost altogether after that, except for, again, some R.A. Salvatore stuff. They are starting to release more D&D novels nowadays, which is really cool, but the biggest thing for me was just the fact that this setting was completely removed from the events of the novels, because it advanced the timeline 100 years in the future, so a lot of the events that happen in the novels could have passed on to be more like legend, or not quite myth, but maybe more like folk tales or things along those lines. But they also had the two worlds of Abir and Toril actually coalesce. So one of the big events in the Forgotten Realms, like early history, was the splitting of the of Abir and Toril into two different planes, basically two different versions of itself that cohabitated the same spot, but in different like reality type of things. So in this version, the two actually sort of merge, and it causes a great deal of change throughout the setting itself. Now, what was also kind of cool about that is they were able to tie it back to the Dawn War, which was updated in this Forgotten Realms for the 4th edition to being the war between the gods and the primordials. So the split, basically, in the Forgotten Realms, the battle between the gods and the primordials was more or less, essentially, it was like a stalemate. So instead of like having a definitive winner, the two worlds were created, and one was governed and overseen by the gods. The others were the primordials ruled over. So it was just kind of a cool concept. And again, we changed quite a bit of the geography. We did bring back, or they did bring back, things like the Netherese Empire, which I was always clamoring for. Like, I'm a huge fan of like some of these like ancient magocracies, and to see the Netherese Empire return was just, in my opinion, super cool. We do have Bosm Gorog, who was a primordial, or is updated to being a primordial. He was a Slad Lord in an adventure called Prison of the Firebringer, which I actually ran for 3.5 D&D. So it's kind of cool to see some of that stuff referenced there. But again, we do have the world itself. Keep bumping the camera. We got Orel's teeth, so again, it's kind of cool to see her being referenced quite a bit. But yeah, we got Returned Abir, so how it affected the different locations. And again, we've got, if I can find it here, I'll skip ahead a little bit. Choltz has become a peninsula now instead of, or has become an island now instead of a peninsula. But still a really cool setting to explore. I loved running the exploration aspect of Tomb of Annihilation for 5e. I hated when we actually got into the actual tomb itself, but I loved the exploration stuff there for that. So it's kind of cool to see that. We do have Elminster, who's not statted in this one. And again, we might have to go quite a bit. There it is. I actually flipped right to it. So we got the return of Netheril and the Netherese. We have the Shade Enclave, which was like one of the sky cities that had returned at the beginning of the events of 3rd edition D&D. But yeah, it's really cool to see that they actually restored the Anarok Desert to being this sort of like land of vegetation that it was during the Netherese Empire. And I don't want to spoil too much, but stuff like this would... like when 5th edition D&D came out, it went back to being like the Anarok Desert, which in my opinion kind of sucks. However, they definitely were toying with the idea of returning the Netherese Empire in some form of fashion, but I just always liked that concept. I love that idea. So yeah, I just really like this campaign setting because, again, it had the history of the Forgotten Realms, but it advanced the timeline and left things much more open. Or at least it felt to me to be more open, to just run whatever kind of adventures that you wanted to and not have to worry about somebody going, actually, if you ever reference something that was already covered in a novel, whether you realize it or not. And I don't know, I just really liked that. I liked the change. I liked the upheaval that they did with the Forgotten Realms. It kind of shook things up a bit. And I feel like 4th or 5th edition just kind of undoing all of that feels a bit like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that, but it was still really cool to have the two worlds sort of coalesce. And that's actually how like the Dragonborn were added to the Forgotten Realms setting for 4th edition. They were part of Abir, and when the two worlds coalesced and parts of one were deposited in the other, and parts of one were ripped into the other, the Dragonborn were among like the deposited races. The Tieflings were explained by Asmodeus becoming a deity when he absorbed Azuth's divine spark and became a god himself. Families and bloodlines that had dealings with him before he became a god. When he did become a god, basically they were corrupted and transformed to show the fact that they had communed with him and became the Tieflings there. So there was just some cool explanations for introducing like the newer races into the 4th edition setting. But again, overall, I just really like the fact that they let things be more open-ended. You didn't feel like you had to incorporate the history of the novels into everything. or at least I didn't feel like I had to, which again was a big part of what was frustrating for me running my early Forgotten Realms campaigns. And again, it's not the setting's fault, it was just the experience, but it's one of those situations where it's hard to remove the experience from the connection to the books. And anyway, but I just really loved this setting. I loved the updates. I loved the changes. I felt a lot more free to just do whatever I wanted with this campaign setting for the adventures that I wanted to design for it. And I really, really genuinely love this book. So that's why it is currently, as of today, my favorite Forgotten Realms book. Again, this list changes all the time. I'm not going to say that, in a year's time, it'll be the exact same list. Hell, in a week's time, I might be looking at my shelves and see a book that I haven't looked at in a while and realize, oh, this one's really good. But the Forgotten Realms campaign setting had a ton of fantastic books that came out for it during the 3rd edition era and into the 4th edition era. There weren't a ton of campaign setting books released for 4E. Like most campaign settings would get 2 books, either the campaign setting and a player's guide, or in the Dark Sun case, it was a campaign setting and a bestiary, or like a monster book. But it was just really cool to see sort of the evolution or sort of the changes in the Forgotten Realms as the timeline advanced. And there were some really fantastic books. So these are just my personal favorites. Feel free to let me know what your personal favorites are. But remember, this is just a place to talk about a hobby and have fun. So let's not get too carried away with edition wars or any of that nonsense or silliness. We're here for a good time. It's a hobby, it's a game, and games are meant to be fun. So feel free to share your opinions on your favorite books for the Forgotten Realms, but just be respectful about it. There's enough negativity out there. We really don't need to extend it into something as silly as a game, right? Let's just try to keep it cool. Anyway, thank you all so very much for your time. I truly appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.